Morning. I trust that you are well and safe as we continue to be church at a distance. In our first lesson this morning, the Apostle Paul is preaching to the Athenians in the middle of Athens. He begins by acknowledging, in every way, you are very religious. Being religious is a good attribute. There are some people who are so dead to the Spirit of God that they don't recognize any God but themselves, or any power but in themselves, or any salvation but by themselves, or any need for help except human help. Their whole spiritual life seems to be dormant. But to the Athenians' benefit, Paul says, your souls are alive. I perceive that you are a very religious people. This impulse to worship someone other than oneself is a good impulse, and they had it. Their only trouble was that they were worshiping everything and everyone, and hence, in reality, no one. Their desire to worship was right. The object of their devotion was wrong. Now, in Athens, there were many altars. Years earlier, there was a terrible pestilence in the city. Does that sound familiar? It was widespread, and many people died. Many people died. And there was an economic shutdown. And I'm sure that an Athenian job that wasn't that great to begin with was now disappearing. And the bills were piling up. And families didn't know whether they could even stay in their homes. Epimenides came forth with a plan. A flock of black and white sheep were to be let loose throughout the city from the Areopagus. Wherever the lambs lay down, it was there sacrificed to the nearest god. And if a sheep lay down near the shrine of no known god, then it was sacrificed to the unknown god. Athens had historically had its regiment of unknown gods. It was one of these signs, these places of worship, that Paul was reacting to in our text this morning. What therefore you worship as unknown, an unknown God, this I proclaim to you, he says. Now, Paul was usually a pretty positive preacher, but he was in Athens, where the intellect, the use of reason, was revered. He knew that his hearers were very sophisticated, or at least they considered themselves such, and he figured that maybe he should try another approach if he was going to gain a hearing. So he preached on the many gods that existed then, all of which he did not believe in. Note that Paul does not believe in a tribal God. That is, a God who loves only one tribe, or one people, or one nation, or one color, or one country, or one sex, or one income category, or one anything. Well, there is one thing that God does love, and that's one humankind. Paul states, he made from every nation of men to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their habitation. If our God is the God who always defends America and who loves only America, then that is the God that Paul does not believe in. If our God is never active in the affairs of other nations, then that is a God that Paul does not believe in. Paul's God is bigger and broader, and his God embraces every nation. God is a citizen of every country. J.B. Phillips, many years ago, wrote a book called Your God is Too Small. The first half of the book is modeled after this morning's sermon by St. Paul at the Areopagus, because in it, Phillips proceeds to make clear the gods that he did not believe in. He says, God is not a resident policeman or a parental hangover or a grand old man or a pale Galilean. And Philip goes on many, many more, including a case for his conviction that we do not have God in a box. So wonderful to be patriotic to what is in our box or in our geographical boundaries, but we should know that we have a God that has no boundaries, who does not recognize walls or rivers or any divisions of countries. Paul does not believe in a God who dwells only up on a mountain or in the sky or in a pillar of fire or in some mysterious place that we cannot inhabit. He does not believe in a God that's always distant, always far removed, always trying to catch up to understand us. We have a God who is nearer to us than our next breath. Take a deep breath. Right now, go ahead. God is that close to you. God knows your thoughts before you think. That's pretty close. God knows every action you're going to make. That's pretty close. Now, Paul does not believe in a God who is created by the imagination of human beings. He says, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, a representation by art and imagination of man. Well, the psychiatrist Sigmund Freud disagreed. He wrote a book called The Future of an Illusion, and in reality, his title tells it all. He argues in the book that God does not exist apart from human beings, and that as a matter of fact, God is only a figment of our fertile imagination. Freud suggests that we humans have certain basic psychological needs, and that one of them is to create gods. Paul is saying that may or may not be true, but if it's true, then that is a God he doesn't believe in. For Christ did not come out of the imagination of humankind, but from heaven itself. Paul does not believe in a God that only exists in our minds. And finally, Paul does not believe in a God who demands nothing of us, expects nothing from us, who is passive in the face of outrageous injustice. Paul does not believe in a God who would wind up the universe and then leave it alone to run down. Being a Christian is to begin a journey, not to arrive at a destination. And in that journey, they are full of commands and demands and expectations that God has for all of us. I will end on a very personal note. I don't think for a minute that we can ever believe in a God who sends people to hell. Believe in a God who does not know hope. Believe in a God whom only the mature or the wise or the comfortably situated can understand. Believe in a God who sometimes regrets giving us free will. I don't think for a minute that we can ever believe in a God who is interested in souls and not in people. The God who always says and feels not a thing about the agonizing problem of suffering, which we're all experiencing in various degrees these days. God the God that's incapable of making everything new. I don't believe in a God who has never wept, the God in whom there are no mysteries, who is not greater than we are, the God who does not love and who does not know how to transform into love everything that God touches, even this dreadful virus. See, I believe in the other God, the God who will get us through COVID-19, the God that is love. Amen.